Hello and welcome to my MCU mega tier ranking list. In the past, I have ranked the MCU movies before, but I think the last time that I did it, there was like 12 MCU movies. Now there's like 50 shows and movies. This is everything available to me on the list. However, some of these aren't really MCU movies or shows, and I'll explain that as I go along a little bit. But how's everybody doing? First of all, thank you everybody who's here live with me: DeGusher, Yannick, Dante, Brooke, AJ, Cheese Deprived. I think I saw Killjoy in here earlier as well. So basically, the MCU strictly is all of the things that Kevin Feige has produced. I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible before I get started on this tier list. Basically, there is Marvel Entertainment, which is, these days, in its entirety, owned by the Disney Corporation. But before, and then of course the movies are part of the Marvel Studios silo, which is run by Kevin Feige. So Marvel Studios is defined as everything that is produced by Kevin Feige. It used to be that Marvel Television was its own thing, and therefore everything that was Marvel Television is technically not part of the MCU. The first official MCU television show was WandaVision, which is produced by Kevin Feige and under the Marvel Studios umbrella. That means that anything that was on ABC, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Agent Carter, or anything that was on Netflix, such as Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, etc., or anything that was on Hulu like Runaways, those things are not technically part of the MCU. Now, we know that Daredevil, as played by Charlie Cox, is making his way back into the MCU. He was in Spider-Man No Way Home. He's going to have a part in She-Hulk. Vincent D'Onofrio, who played Kingpin, was in the Hawkeye show. So those characters are now part of the MCU. We don't know how much of the old Netflix Daredevil show is canon to the MCU. I have a feeling that that's going to be like a separate universe, and they'll just kind of pick and choose which parts of the Netflix show are canon. But again, technically, the Netflix Daredevil show is technically not part of the MCU because Kevin Feige did not start producing MCU shows until WandaVision. There is no more Marvel Television. There is just Marvel Studios making shows for Disney Plus. I hope that makes sense. The second part is that Spider-Man is the only real Marvel character, or I should say Marvel characters, because Spider-Man and his associated characters, that the film rights are not owned by Marvel Studios. And this is where it gets really complicated. And again, I will try to make this as concise as possible. Back in the 80s and 90s, Marvel was at a time going bankrupt and needed to make some quick money, so they started selling the film rights to their characters. They sold the rights to the Fantastic Four and X-Men to Fox, and that's why Fox made so many X-Men and Fantastic Four movies. They sold the rights to Blade to like New Line Cinema. They sold the rights to Spider-Man to Sony. Now, since Disney has purchased Marvel, they have spent the last several years reacquiring all the film rights back from those studios so that Marvel owns the film rights to their own characters. So that's why we're getting a new Blade movie. We have Hulk, and then Disney just bought 20th Century Fox outright, so that's why we're getting the Mutants and the Fantastic Four into the MCU. The only characters that Marvel doesn't own the film rights to is Spider-Man and his associated characters like Venom, Morbius, Black Cat, Sable, Silver Sable, etc. And the only reason why they can't acquire those is because Sony is a stubborn SOB and won't give them the film rights back. Even when Disney, I think Disney offered them like $6 billion, and they were still like, nah. So, they had to work out this awkward contract with Sony where, Spider-Man's allowed in the MCU and MCU characters are allowed into Spider-Man films, and Kevin Feige produces like the Homecoming films. But Sony makes most of the profits or something like that. But at the end of the day, Sony still owns the film rights to Spider-Man. It's kind of a horrible situation that I hope eventually figures itself out. But for the time being, that means that aside from like Tom Holland being in the MCU, Sony is allowed to make movies like Venom and Morbius, and they're going to do a Kraven the Hunter, and those movies have basically nothing to do with the MCU except for that Venom end credits thing, which was lame. But those movies have nothing to do with the MCU. That's just Sony owning Spider-Man characters, making their own movies, and that's kind of its own bag of worms. And again, I could make I've teased that I would make a video about that in the future, but I just wanted to get that out of the way because Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home, yes, those are part of the MCU. But like the Sam Raimi films, the Amazing Spider-Man films, even though Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, spoilers, were in Spider-Man No Way Home, those movies still are not technically part of the MCU. And I know that Venom, whoever made this initial tier list, they put movies like Venom and Morbius on this list, but those are not part of the MCU, so I will not be ranking those. I will also not be ranking all the individual Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. shows. The only non-MCU show I will rank is Daredevil because I love Daredevil. He's one of my favorite Marvel characters. Anyway, now that all that preface is out of the way, yeah, so sorry, I'm reading your questions now, Brooke, but I think I basically answered your question. So yeah, let's get to the actual ranking of the MCU here. And again, welcome everybody who's here. Yep. Anyways, I'm going to try to go in as best of an order as I can. You'll notice we're going S through D. There is no F because as far as I'm concerned, there's no failure in the MCU unless we did want to start ranking some of those Marvel television shows like The Inhumans. That might be a failure, but I'm not ranking that. Anyways, so we'll start with Iron Man, which was the first MCU movie. And we can thank people like, again, Kevin Feige, but especially Jon Favreau for kind of setting up the tone for the initial MCU. Iron Man still holds up. I'm going to put it as an A because, I mean, if you watch Iron Man today, it's still really good. I still love the original Iron Man. But again, it's hard to place it as an S rank after we have movies like Infinity War and Endgame. There's just like the bar keeps getting raised. Anyways, but I'm going to put it as an A because it is an outstanding movie. Next, we'll have The Incredible Hulk, which was the Ed Norton's movie. Hold on, it's not going to be C. I'm going to put it as a B. So that was Ed Norton's Incredible Hulk. A lot of people don't realize that this movie is still canon to the MCU, of course, because everything still matters in it, like Thunderbolt Ross as played by William Hurt. William Hurt went on to play Thunderbolt Ross in Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Black Widow. I know that William Hurt recently passed away, but his character may still live on. They teased at Comic-Con that Phase 5 is ending with a Thunderbolts movie, and the only reason why the team is called Thunderbolts is because of Thunderbolt Ross. So his character has to do, at least with the inspiration for the name, in the comics, of course, he becomes Red Hulk and kind of leads that team. But anyways, the point is, the events of the Incredible Hulk still happened, but by the time we got to the first Avengers film, they had replaced Edward Norton with Mark Ruffalo for a bunch of reasons that are still mostly unclear, but it's probably because Edward Norton is not a team player. Great actor, I love Ed Norton, but it seems like people that work with him tend to say that like he's not a great team player. He tries to like rewrite the script as they go, and Mark Ruffalo has proven himself to be like the more I really enjoy Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk, so I'm glad that they did replace. Apparently, Mark Ruffalo was the first choice anyway, but then he wasn't available at that time, so they got Ed Norton. So, anyways, they got who they wanted in the end anyway. Okay, so after Hulk, we go Iron Man 2. Now, Iron Man 2, I do think it's a lot of fun for the most part, and it introduced us to Black Widow, but the movie is a mess. Whiplash does not have the effect he had in the comics. There are a lot of problems in Iron Man 2, and although I considered it a wholly enjoyable film, I do not think it's as good as the first one. I'm tempted to give it a C, but I'll put it on B for now. And then, of course, after Iron Man 2, we have the first Thor. I really enjoyed the fish out of water Thor experience. I know a lot of people didn't care for it, but I really enjoyed that, like when he's breaking glasses. Another. I'm going to put that on B just because I enjoy it, but there are better Thor movies. And it's not quite the caliber of the first Iron Man still. At this point in the MCU, the first Iron Man was still the best movie. Until we get to one of my personal favorites, which is the first Captain America, which I am going to rank as A. Because Captain America is one of my favorite characters still, and I really love how they got Joe Johnston, who of course directed The Rocketeer in the 90s, to basically remake that movie as Captain America. Oh yes, Super World Jumper Eye. Of course I've seen the Bill Bixby show. I loved that as a kid. I watched reruns on like Nick at Night or something. Brooke says, Thor was funny but not the best of the trilogy of Thor. Technically, Thor is a quadrilogy now because there's 4. Let's not forget Love and Thunder. Okay, so after Captain America, then of course we have the first Avengers. Now here's the thing about Avengers. I'm actually going to put the first Avengers as a B, and I'll tell you why. I think that at the time that the first Avengers came out, I think that I really loved it, but I think I really loved it mostly because it was the first time in cinema that we had seen all these characters on screen at the same time. Like, of course, there's the famous rotating shot going around showing all the Avengers. That stuff's really cool. However, the rewatch after the fact, it kind of falls a little flat, and it is unfortunately a victim of a lot of the writing of it's funny, I used to be a big fan Joss Whedon. Unfortunately, a lot of Joss Whedon's writing kind of falls flat. I know that Joss Whedon gets a lot of flack for, how he ruined the Justice League, a movie that was probably already doomed from the start. But, people jokingly call it the Justice League. But unfortunately, Joss Whedon does kind of have a certain tempo that he stays to. He cannot write a show or a movie that doesn't involve a major character's death by the end to save his life. He has to kill somebody off. That's kind of his thing. He has to kill somebody off, and in this case, it was Agent Coulson. Although I think that the movie works overall, it does suffer a little bit from Joss Whedon-ness, and that's kind of like a nuanced thing that's really hard to explain. But like, there's a lot of jokes that don't land. There's a lot, like the first 45 minutes of the movie, kind of slow till we get to the build-up. And again, I think the movie works overall, but like it's not as good in the replay, I will say. And again, nothing really against Joss Whedon except for all those things that are actually against Joss Whedon as a person. But as an artist, I think that he suffers from kind of just being himself. I think Joss Whedon, the director, is too in love with Joss Whedon, the writer. That I could do a whole separate video on. But basically, the first Avengers, it's still a good movie. It just doesn't land like it did when you first saw it. Anyways. Yeah. of course, Loki, Tom Hiddleston, great. Again, people I see in the comments are saying, but Loki, yeah, Loki's fantastic. Loki saves that movie. Okay, after first Avengers, I think the next one would have been Iron Man 3. It's one of those. But I'm going to go with Iron Man 3 as the next one. And a lot of people don't like Iron Man 3. A lot of the things that made, a lot of comic book fans, I would say, didn't like Iron Man 3. And a lot of it has to do with the way that they butchered the Mandarin. But that was then rectified in Shang-Chi. We got the real Mandarin finally in Shang-Chi. So the sins of Iron Man 3 no longer count because the MCU has fixed those problems. We finally got the real Mandarin in Shang-Chi. So I would say that now Iron Man 3 is elevated to just being an awesome movie. And I would say I initially enjoyed it just as much as the first Iron Man. And it had a lot of... I think his name is Shane Black. He directed Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, another Robert Downey Jr. movie that I also really enjoy. I think Iron Man 3 is a lot of fun. I certainly think it's an improvement over Iron Man 2. Where is it on here? You guys are probably seeing it, but I do not. Iron Man, where are you? Where are you, Iron Man? Come on. I feel like I'm just staring. There's just so much going on this list. And when there was multiple Iron Mans grouped together, it was easy to see. But now that I've moved some up, I'm having a hard time finding it. I wish I could delete some stuff off this list to make it easier for me. Come on, where are you, Iron Man 3? Get over here. Wow. Row 3. Thank you, Jordan. Oh, thank you, Jordan. Found it. I'm going to put Iron Man 3 on A. Because, again, it's pretty good. And I loved Guy Pearce's weird role in that movie. All right, next we'll have, I believe, Thor the Dark World. It was either Thor the Dark World or Captain America the Winter Soldier. We're going to go with the Dark World first. Of course, nobody likes the Dark World, and I think for a lot of people for a long time, the Dark World was considered the worst MCU movie because it is so boring, which is why they had to bring in Taika Waititi to revive Thor after that with Ragnarok. So the Dark World is probably the first movie on this list that gets a D. Here it is. It's not that The Dark World is a bad movie, and of course there's a lot of things that happen in The Dark World that are extremely important. Thor's mom dies, they kill some dark elves, Loki is, revealed to die and then be alive by the end, replacing Odin. I mean, it's like, and they refer back to these things a lot in, Thor Ragnarok, in Endgame. So it's like the events of Thor, The Dark World are important. The movie itself just falls flat as hell. And it's the only MCU movie, I think it's the only MCU movie that I've only watched one time. I've only watched it one time in my whole life. It falls extremely flat. So our first D, again, it's not a total failure. There are no Fs on this list. There is no F on this list. There is no failure, but there is D, and Dark World gets a D for Dark World. All right, now we have the Winter Soldier, and much like Thor: The Dark World was our first D, Winter Soldier is our first S rank movie. Now, understand, I've been a big fan of comic books my whole life. I work at a comic book shop. I love, these characters. I'm a big fan of Marvel, obviously. But until The Winter Soldier, I had really been enjoying the direction that they were going, but it never really felt like, it felt like, these were just like really good adaptations, but it never really felt like I was watching the character that I had read on paper on screen until Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier was the first MCU movie that made me feel like the people behind the movie really understood the characters from the comics. And this is, of course, the first movie directed by the Russo brothers. The Russo brothers directed Winter Soldier, and they would go on, of course, to direct Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. As far as I'm concerned, the duo of the Russo brothers are the best directors in the MCU, and the fact that they haven't paid them billions of dollars to come back and direct almost everything else, it astounds me. Like, they're not coming back to direct Kang Dynasty or Secret War or anything. It's like, why aren't we just paying the Russo brothers top dollar to just direct everything? Honestly, I don't know. If I'm Kevin Feige, I would have just paid Russo brothers whatever they wanted to just like keep them on contract. But anyways, Winter Soldier is our first it's our first Russo brothers directed MCU movie, and it's the beginning of greatness as far as I'm concerned. Like, the MCU started with Iron Man, it was good, but Winter Soldier is when it becomes great. It becomes the MCU that we know it today. The reason why a lot of people have been disappointed with Phase 4 is because of Winter Soldier and what that started. Because I promise you, and I've made this point in other videos, the movies of Phase 4 are not worse than the movies of Phase 1. People forget, like, go back and watch Phase 1. Those movies aren't really that connected to each other. They didn't really make sense until Avengers. And again, we weren't introduced to Thanos till the end credits of the first Avengers movie. Nothing made sense, nothing was connected, nothing was going anywhere until that very end credit scene of Avengers 1 where we finally saw a glimpse of Thanos, and then it was kind of forgotten again until a little bit later. But we've already had a huge scene with Kang in Loki, and we're getting a bunch of Kang in Quantumania, next year. Like, Phase 4 to Phase 5 and everything is already ramping up faster than Phase 1 to Phase 2 did, and yet your expectations were set so high by Phase 2 and 3 that you just want Phase 4 to be just as good as those phases, even though the only goal of Phase 4 really should be better than Phase 1 because we're ramping up again. Anyways, that's a whole nother lesson about expectations, but the point is, your expectations are so high because of Winter Soldier and everything that came after it. But anyways, long story short, I've really been enjoying Phase 4, so it doesn't matter. But I'm just saying, like, this is why the MCU is so good, is because of the Russo brothers. Okay, so anyways, after Winter Soldier, so we had Dark World, we had Iron Man 3, we have Winter Soldier, and then I'm trying to think, does it go right? No. We had Guardians of the Galaxy. We had the first Guardians of the Galaxy also. So Guardians of the Galaxy, I mean, do I even need a reason? It's S rank. I loved it. It was a breath of fresh air, completely different from everything else. Really great, really funny, really exciting. I love Rocket. I love Groot. I love everything about it. Still probably the best Chris Pratt performance in any of his films. It's just really great. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I know. I'm waiting for Galactus 2, AJ, and I've got a whole theory about how they're going to connect Kang to Galactus and Doctor Doom. But I mean, I'll either save that for another video or I'll just keep it up in my brain because it's kind of a lot. And it might be something I should really do with the A1 crew. I don't know. So we got Guardians of the Galaxy. And then we'll have the second Avengers, which is Age of Ultron. That is going to be a C. That's our first C-list movie. It's not even as good as the first Avengers. Age of Ultron, when I do my MCU watches, like when I go through all the MCU movies, which it's getting harder and harder to do because there's so many MCU movies, but when I go through my watch of MCU, most of the time I'll skip Age of Ultron. It's really boring. It's definitely amongst the worst MCU films. And again, if the first Avengers suffered from Joss Whedon, the second Avengers definitely showed that he didn't care. And in fact, most of the cast and crew of Age of Ultron that have spoken about this have said that it just seemed like Joss Whedon was kind of just like sleepwalking through that movie. I don't think he really cared about what he was directing here. It really shows kind of a lack of whatever. I Really dislike that they killed off Quicksilver so soon. Quicksilver is extremely important, and he's a character that should not have been killed off. And the fact that Joss Whedon wanted him killed off and he got away with it, I just don't understand. Like, it's stupid. I mean, yeah, it's done with now, right? But like at the time, I was really pissed off that they killed Quicksilver. The movie just upsets me. The whole movie upsets me. Also, they killed off Ultron too, and Ultron is one of those Marvel enemies that like keeps coming back. He's a robot, so technically his AI could exist somewhere, and they could bring him back. But I don't know. It just feels like it almost makes me. It feels like a '90s superhero movie the way they killed off Ultron. And I refer to like '90s, like in the '90s, like Batman and stuff, where it's like they would just kill off villains because movie. Villains are supposed to just keep coming back. Nobody really dies in comic books. Yeah, just blah. Anyways, it's not a good movie. Anyways, there's some really important stuff that happens in Age of Ultron, but it's just not a good movie. All right, after that, I think Ant-Man would have been the next movie. And Ant-Man is great. I'm giving Ant-Man an S, which would surprise a lot of you, I'm sure. But like Paul Rudd, one of my favorite actors. I think he does a great job playing the Scott Lang Ant-Man. I love Michael Douglas as old Hank Pym, OG Ant-Man. Evangeline Lilly is great as Hope. Really, the whole cast is great. I loved Ant-Man. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a really good version of Ant-Man. Also, the movie's just a lot of fun. Lot of fun there. And then we get into phase 3. So, let me think here. What was the beginning of phase 3? I don't remember everything that was at the beginning of phase 3, but I'm going to start with Civil War, because I think that's the next one. And Civil War, of course, is the second Russo brothers directed film, so it also gets an S rank. When Civil War came out, I was really impressed. Of course, it doesn't follow the Civil War arc from the comics very much, but I mean, when you're making movies, you have to adapt. And I've made this argument for any movies that are based off books or anything else, that like when people are like, oh, it didn't like, if it followed the book exactly, then every movie would have to be like 8 hours long. And the Civil War arc is pretty dense in the comics, so like, I mean, they could have made a TV show, but also they didn't have all the characters introduced yet to properly do the Civil War comic arc. Anyways, that aside, the movie itself is great. It's a great movie. It gave us those great, splash page moments where all the characters are fighting each other. Those moments where they're fighting at the airport, that really felt like comic book fight. And of course, we would get more of that in Infinity War and Endgame. But Civil War was the first time where it really felt like those splash pages. Anyways, really great stuff. Really great stuff. Love Civil War. And then after Civil War, we're getting... I mean, I got to throw Guardians 2 in there at some point, so I might as well do that wherever it went. Here we go, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, not as good as the first one. I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun, but it, like, I don't know why, but for some reason, like, I've only revisited Volume 2, like, once more. So, like, I think I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, like, 10 times. I've seen the second one maybe twice. It's, for some reason, it's not as good. It's not as good for some reason. I don't know. I don't know why. It's good. It's just not as good. It's not S rank. It is not S rank. Blah. Spider-Man Homecoming comes after Civil War, so I can logistically put it here somewhere. Where is Homecoming? It's right here. I'm going to give Spider-Man Homecoming a A. It's pretty good. It further elaborates on Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and we got a little bit of Tom Holland's Spider-Man in Civil War. This version of Spider-Man, as many of you know, doesn't really have an origin story. He's just Spider-Man. Now they're gonna do a show for Disney Plus called Spider-Man Freshman Year, which will kind of deep dive into the origin of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But the argument that they made when they were first doing Tom Holland's Spider-Man was that since you already know Spider-Man's origin from the countless versions of, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, all the animated shows, they figure at this point everybody knows the origin of Peter Parker. We don't need to see Uncle Ben die for a 12th time. That was the reasoning. But even at the time that Homecoming came out, I was saying, I get why they didn't want to include all the Uncle Ben stuff because people have seen it 1,000 times, but because Tom Holland is our Spider-Man and will be our Spider-Man for the foreseeable future, I think it was a bad idea to skip it because people are going to go like, oh, like a lot of people will go, oh, I don't need to watch the Tobey Maguire movies or the Andrew Garfield movies because Tom Holland is our current Spider-Man. I'll just watch his movies. I don't know why, but that's what people do. They're just going to watch whatever. Like kids in the future, when they're watching the MCU, they're probably not going to go back and watch the Sam Raimi trilogy. They're just going to want to watch the MCU. And therefore, they're not going to see the origin of Spider-Man. So again, hopefully freshman year will become a necessary part and really deep dive into Uncle Ben. But even without the Uncle Ben origin, I still enjoy Homecoming. It's just not S rank for me. Spider-Man is, of course, my favorite comic book character of all time, but the MCU, until No Way Home, we'll get there when we get there anyways. Okay, so then I think we had Doctor Strange, and again, I can't remember if that came out before or after Homecoming, but we're just doing this as we go here. So Doctor Strange, where are you, Doctor Strange? Here we go. Doctor Strange, really good. I'm going to give it an A. I don't feel like it was quite S rank, but I really enjoyed Doctor Strange. I love Benedict Cumberbatch as the character. I think he was perfect casting. The only reason it doesn't get an S is just because it feels like we should have gotten the Doctor Strange movie in Phase 2. They saved it for Phase 3. And, I just feel like he should have really been introduced in Phase 2. That's my only gripe, and I know that seems like a thin gripe, but it just feels like after Civil War and, all the other things, and then we're going to get Ragnarok here. Right after Doctor Strange, we got Ragnarok. It just feels weird to have an origin story sandwiched in the middle of the last phase of the Infinity Saga. Like, again, it makes sense that we're having a bunch of new origin stories now in Phase 4, because Phase 4 is really the beginning of a whole new thing. It's the beginning of the multiverse saga. That's what we're calling it now. But it felt weird to have an origin story in the middle of Phase 3, which is another reason why Captain Marvel feels a little weird to me as well. But we'll get there when we get there. Anyways, Thor Ragnarok, really great. It's over here. Thor Ragnarok gets S. They brought in Taika Waititi to revitalize the Thor brand because Dark World was so bad. So we got Ragnarok, which is still one of my favorite MCU movies. I loved everything about it. I love the Planet Hulk stuff. Again, Mark Ruffalo great as the Hulk. Really great Loki scenes. I thought it was a nice opportunity for Chris Hemsworth to live it up a little bit after being so serious in Dark World. He could really open up a bit. And then, of course, we have Hela. It's just I think it's a great movie. A lot of great moments. I have nothing bad to say about Ragnarok. It's fantastic. It's just pretty much a perfect movie as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let me make sure I'm not missing any Phase 3 movies here. Okay. Well, I think the next one I'm gonna do is actually Daredevil. And I'll use the season three thumb as the as what I because I'm not gonna rate individual seasons of Daredevil, but I will put Daredevil up here as an S rank. And again, it's the only Marvel Television thing I'm gonna put up there. And again, Marvel Television, not the same as Disney Plus shows because the Disney Plus shows are part of Marvel Studios and officially part of the MCU, which is Marvel Television was everything made for ABC or Netflix before Kevin Feige really had a hand in the television side. Anyways, Daredevil, it's perfect. Charlie Cox is perfect as Matthew Murdock / Daredevil. I'm so over the moon excited that he's coming into She-Hulk, and now we have confirmation that he's getting his own show again in Daredevil Born Again. I really loved his cameo in Spider-Man No Way Home. If you haven't watched Daredevil, watch Daredevil. It's immaculate. I can't stress enough how great it is. Okay, now we have, Black Panther would be the next one. Where is Black Panther? Well, maybe Black Panther will show up when when I've gone through more of this list. Anyways, we can also do Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel before we get to like Infinity War and stuff. I don't know why I'm not seeing Black Panther on here. So Ant-Man and the Wasp, I'm going to put that as an A. I really enjoyed it, but it's not as good as the first Ant-Man for reasons I can't explain. Maybe it's just because, a lot of times sequels that are just as good as the first ones don't seem as good as the first ones because the first one's the first one and you get that initial experience and then the second one is not as good. Just because it's the second one. I don't know. I really enjoy Ant-Man and the Wasp, but it's probably not as good. And then we have... Oh, there it is. Yes, thank you. We have Black Panther. I'm going to give it an S rank. I really enjoyed Black Panther. I thought it was a great introduction to Wakanda and all the characters. I really love Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger. It was really good. I'm really excited for Wakanda Forever. Wakanda Forever will be the final Phase 4 movie. I'm sad, of course, that Chadwick Boseman will not be there to play T'Challa. I'm really interested to see how they kind of work around not having him. But, of course, that nothing that they do can kind of fill the void of him not being there. So it's a real shame that he is not with us anymore because I think that the world lost one of the greatest actors. He wasn't just Black Panther. I loved him in 21, which was like the baseball movie. And he played James Brown in that one movie. And he was in a lot of other stuff that was really good. And I know that he was, he seemed like he was a great guy, just a great person. Kind of the, he seemed like the kind of guy that would help you move, He seemed like a really nice guy. So, anyways, so I'm excited for Wakanda Forever, but it won't be the same without Chadwick Boseman. Having said that, though, the first Black Panther was amazing, and so it gets S rank because it is definitely one of the most visually stunning and fulfilling MCU movies. Next, we have Captain Marvel, which I'm giving an A because it's not S tier for several reasons, and kind of like Doctor Strange, it feels a little late in the game for an origin movie. And at this point, Captain Marvel was even later in the game than Doctor Strange. And by this point, Doctor Strange had his solo movie. Doctor Strange showed up in Thor Ragnarok. Doctor Strange would have a major part in Infinity War. And Doctor Strange, of course, would show up to have a very important part at the end of Endgame. So in Phase 3, Doctor Strange had 4 roles to play. But with Captain Marvel, it felt very much like Captain Marvel had the origin story and then shows up in Endgame. It was like, it was just too soon. Origin movie and then Endgame. It was just too soon with Captain Marvel. I think that I think the MCU could have benefited from Captain Marvel having taken place during Phase 2, and then had her have a more active role in Infinity War before Endgame, but yes, I'm so sorry, Killjoy, I meant 42, my bad. Where he played Jackie Robinson, yes, correct. 21. That's half of 42. Anyways, but yeah, Captain Marvel, not a bad movie. It could have gotten an S rank if it maybe came out in Phase 2 and then felt a little bit more connected, but it just seems weird to have a 90s period piece origin story in the tail end of Phase 3. It just, I don't know, it just didn't hit for me, but the movie does do a lot of important things. It introduces the, Skrulls. It introduces Captain Marvel. It tells her origin story, and then also kind of sets up a lot of things that will become important in the MCU at that point and now and forever. But overall, I do really enjoy the character of Captain Marvel. I'm a little sad that they didn't have her be Ms. Marvel first, because in the comic books, Carol Danvers was Ms. Marvel for decades before she became Captain Marvel, and I feel like that when she's Ms. Marvel, I think that's a really important arc for the character, and it's part of the character's growth. But the fact that we just had Carol Danvers go straight to Captain Marvel, I don't know, it feels like we're missing a really important part of that character's history. So that's a gripe of mine, but otherwise I do enjoy the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel character, but again, it would have been nice to have her as Ms. Marvel, and it would have been nice if we could have acquired those X-Men rights years ago, because of course Rogue is supposed to get her powers from Carol Danvers, and that's a whole thing, and they could still do that when they finally introduce the X-Men. You could still have Rogue take her powers from Captain Marvel, if they want to be, because that's how Rogue gets her flight and super strength, is she steals it from Carol Danvers. But it's supposed to happen when Carol Danvers is still Ms. Marvel. Understand that Carol Danvers was Ms. Marvel for decades. She basically had the same powers that she has now as Captain Marvel. Our current Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, is a completely different character with a completely different set of powers, but is also going by Ms. Marvel now. But that's not the same Ms. Marvel as Carol Danvers for like most of Marvel comics. Wow. No, Brooke, that's not a thing, because Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers has been Captain Marvel for the better part of 12 to 15 years in the comics. And even then, like, she was Ms. Marvel and was seen as kind of like the main, like, Marvel, like, because there used to be Marvel, and then Carol Danvers took over from that. I think there was a Captain Marvel. Oh yeah, because Photon, who is Monica Rambeau, who is now Spectre, that was that's the character Monica Rambeau. We saw her in WandaVision. That character was actually Captain Marvel for a while, like in the 80s, and was technically, so we had Monica Rambeau as Captain Marvel for a while, but the point is, even in the 80s, when Monica Rambeau was Captain Marvel was still a female. So, I don't know why. Anybody who's mad that Captain Marvel is a female probably has never opened up a comic book. And yeah, people shouldn't be confused about Shazam Super World Jumper, because Shazam, the character of Shazam, has not been referred to as Captain Marvel since the 40s. Back in the 40s, the character that we now know as Shazam from DC Comics, back when he was published by Fawcett Comics, went by Captain Marvel. But then Marvel Comics was like, you can't call your character Captain Marvel because we're Marvel Comics, and that's really confusing. So they sued each other, and after a lengthy battle, by the 70s, the character was called Shazam. But that shouldn't really confuse anybody today, because that character hasn't been called Captain Marvel in a long time. Anyways. But anyways, the current Captain Marvel is Carol Danvers, And again, anybody who's mad that it's a female just has probably never opened up a comic book in their life, and they're just mad just to be mad, apparently. Anyways, so then let's get into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, which is, of course, Infinity War and Endgame. And I'm just going to save everybody time by putting them both up on S, because they're both great. I know that a lot of people like to play the game of what was better, Infinity War or Endgame, and I think that that's a little silly, because really, at least in my mind, Infinity War and Endgame are really just one big movie that, of course, had to be split into two, so that way we could experience a 5-hour movie, but they don't want to put a 5-hour movie in movie theaters, so they had to split it in two. And of course, they had to space it out by a year because they wanted to maximize profits. But really, Infinity War and Endgame really are just one big movie. You have, the hero's journey, if you will, of the threat and the heroes coming together in Infinity War. And then in Endgame, you finish the hero cycle by having the darkest hour. The heroes come back and they triumph. Basically, both movies kind of have that hero circle. So really, it's just. I think I've heard a lot of people say they prefer Infinity War, but that's the build-up. That's like watching Luke Skywalker go to the Death Star and save Princess Leia. So yeah, it's great. But Endgame would be like the Death Star trench run. You know what I mean? It's it's one. It really is just one movie that is split up into two parts. So it's not that I prefer one over the other. I could never make that assessment, because I truly see Infinity War and Endgame as a singular thing. Anyways, blah de blah de blah. Okay, so after Avengers Endgame, I think Far From Home was the next one. I think that if I'm being true to my opinion, I have to put Far From Home as a B. I didn't like it as much as Homecoming, and honestly, it might even be my least favorite Spider-Man movie ever, because most of the movie doesn't take place in New York. And I know that all of Marvel, for the most part, takes place in New York. And, that's part of, Stan Lee, when he's at Marvel in New York, thinking of inspiration, he's looking out his window and there's New York. Marvel, for the most part, almost all of it takes place in New York City. But it's especially important to Peter Parker, the boy from Queens. He's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I feel like probably the biggest thing about the MCU Spider-Man has been he's never really felt like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He just kind of got thrust into the Avengers and has been doing big league stuff. Homecoming, I thought, was better at doing the neighborhood Spider-Man thing, but Far From Home took him to Europe, and I don't know, it just didn't really feel like Spider-Man to me very much. It's cool. I liked Far From Home. I was entertained by Far From Home, but as a Spider-Man movie, I don't think that it worked. I don't think it worked very well, but I do enjoy Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. I thought that was good, but I don't know. Taking Spider-Man out of New York, it just felt like if we're doing a Spider-Man solo film, we should really focus on Spider-Man saving people in New York. But I think we're getting to that thanks to the ending of No Way Home. It seems like we're kind of going to go back to basics a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I love Spider-Man in the MCU. I love all the MCU connections. But for his solo movies, yes, he can work with other MCU characters, but please, God, keep him in New York City. Anyways. And then I think... So, Far From Home, I think that was the last Phase 3 movie. Then there was the long break because of, the world and everything that was happening. And then Phase 4 began with our first Marvel Studios television show. And again, that's important to note because, again, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, all the Netflix stuff, those aren't really part of the MCU. They really wanted to be part of the MCU, but they're not because they weren't produced by Kevin Feige. Eventually, thanks to Bob Iger, Kevin Feige became head of all of Marvel. And so in his mind, in the eyes of all of you, as it should be, the first Marvel Studios TV show was WandaVision. And as far as anyone's concerned, that's the first one that's actually canonically connected to the MCU. But now, of course, retroactively, Daredevil is now a part of that, and that's a whole thing. But anyways, WandaVision would be next, and WandaVision is awesome. I really enjoyed WandaVision. I don't think it would surprise anyone that I'm putting WandaVision as S. I still think it's possibly the best Marvel Disney Plus show that we've had so far. After WandaVision, we got Winter Soldier, Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I enjoyed, but there are a lot of boring parts in Falcon and Winter Soldier. A lot of parts that I felt like could have been sped up. I think you could have done the whole thing in like 3 episodes, and I don't remember how many episodes it was dragged out into, but I think it would have served it really well to be in like 3 episodes. It could have been great as a movie, but they dragged it out. So it's going to go on B. I enjoyed it, but it's got a lot of boring parts. Next, I think maybe Black Widow was after that. I can't remember, but Black Widow also getting a B. It just feels weird to have a movie that takes place right after Civil War take place in the middle of Phase 4. You know, a lot of this has to do with placement. I think that Black Widow could have been a great movie if it had come out right after Civil War. But after Endgame, like we already know Natasha dies, it just feels really flat. I really appreciate that it introduces Yelena as the new Black Widow, but the movie overall just felt really flat to me. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I enjoy Black Widow, but again, it could have been great if it came out right after Civil War. I think that was just bad timing. A little too late to introduce a Black Widow solo movie, in my opinion. Okay, and then we have Loki. I think Loki came out after that, so where is Loki on this list? Tra-la-la-la-la. Loki. Here it is. Loki also gets S. I really enjoy Loki. And really, Loki kind of sets up everything that Phase 4 is really becoming. And to a certain extent, the whole Phase 4, 5, and 6 multiverse saga really starts with the timeline breaking at the end of Loki. At the end of Loki is also the first time we meet Kang the Conqueror, or as that variant is known, He Who Remains. And it's the only part that Jonathan Majors has played so far. Of course, we do know that he will show up again as Kang in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But I think, personally, it is my thinking and my hope that Kang the Conqueror isn't really the main bad guy of this whole multiverse saga. I think he's more of a red herring or a smokescreen, and that the real villain, who will probably be introduced in the upcoming Wakanda Forever movie, is Doctor Doom, Victor Von Doom. Because if we're ending the multiverse saga with Secret Wars, you gotta have Doctor Doom. Because if anybody's read the original 80s Secret Wars, Doctor Doom is kind of like the central character of that whole thing. And in the 2015 Secret Wars, which is probably what this is really based off of, guess what? Doctor Doom is still like the central character. You cannot do Secret Wars without Doctor Doom. So they got to get fast on introducing that Doctor Doom, because Doctor Doom is the real threat. He is, if you're talking about who's more dangerous than Thanos, who's more dangerous than Loki, who's more dangerous than Kang the Conqueror, who's potentially more dangerous than Galactus, the answer is always Doctor Doom. I really consider Doctor Doom to be the main villain of the entire Marvel universe. Anyways. Really great. Really great stuff. So that was Loki. Shang-Chi, I really enjoyed as well. I know that it's somewhere on this list. Man, I wish I could get rid of all the stuff I'm not going to put up here. Where is Shang-Chi? Come on, Shang-Chi. Where you at? There it is. Okay. I really enjoyed Shang-Chi. It's kind of hard to place. I'm going to put it on A because I really enjoyed it. It didn't really wow me, but I really enjoyed it. But I don't enjoy it as much as I enjoy things like Loki or Black Panther. But I did enjoy it. It gets an A. It gets an A for being awesome, but not spectacular, I guess. After Shang-Chi, what was next? I think Hawkeye. I really enjoyed Hawkeye. I probably enjoyed Hawkeye more than most people, or at least from people I've talked to. But I think my favorite part of Hawkeye is just that in the last episode we get Vincent D'Onofrio back as Kingpin, and at the time that happened, I think that happened like a week after we finally saw Charlie. Oh, I guess I should have put. Well, no. Well, Spider-Man No Way Home came out in the middle of Hawkeye's run, so we'll do No Way Home next. But I think like what happened was we saw Charlie Cox come back as Matt Murdock in No Way Home, and then we got Vincent D'Onofrio in the last episode as Kingpin in Hawkeye. So I mean that was a lot of fun for me because again, Daredevil's one of my favorite characters. I loved the show, and I was worried, when Daredevil was canceled. I'm like, oh, and I'm sure that Kevin Feige will cast really good people as Daredevil and Kingpin. But I don't know if I'm going to like them as much as Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio because they were basically perfect. So I'm glad that he realized that you can't do better than Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, and they are going to be our Daredevil and Kingpin going forward. So I'm really excited about all of that. Yeah, I think it was great. Anyways, I really enjoyed Hawkeye, especially just Kingpin in there. Anyways. And then there's Spider-Man No Way Home, which so far has been the best MCU Spider-Man movie. I don't know if it's my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time. I remember thinking when it came out, I was like, this could potentially be the best Spider-Man movie of all time. But I'm still kind of partial to Spider-Man 2, but it's hard to say. There's a lot to love about Spider-Man No Way Home, and I think that one of the reasons why it sticks out is because even though if you have, Doctor Strange and you have like 5 villains, the whole thing takes place in New York. You've got, you've got J. Jonah Jameson trying to foil Spider-Man. It's really the first MCU Spider-Man movie that really feels like a Spider-Man movie. And then we get all 3 live-action Spider-Man in there, Spider-Men, and, of course, that's an amazing sight to see, Tom Holland with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. It really felt like a Spider-Man movie, and the ending, of course, alludes to an even more true-to-form Spider-Man movie coming up. And, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. I feel like it doesn't even need any explanation for me. I'm sure you've all seen Spider-Man No Way Home, and all loved it because it's great. I think I skipped to the Eternals by accident. It just wasn't very memorable. It gets a C. I know that a lot of people are down on Eternals. The movie's not bad. It's not even good. I would say it's okay, which is why it's perfect at C, because that's average. I guess, that's what C is supposed to mean. It's like, I probably won't watch Eternals again unless like something happens in the MCU where the Eternals are super important and I need to rewatch the Eternals to remember something. But even then, I'll probably just watch somebody else's like 5-minute recap video. There's probably no reason to rewatch the Eternals ever. It's not a bad movie. It's just not good. I don't know. It bored the hell out of me. It's boring. Let's see. So Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home. What was the next show after that? I don't remember if we had another Marvel show until Ms. Marvel. I can't remember. But the movies that we've had this year are, Doctor Strange, we've had Thor, so because I can't remember anything in between, we're going to go ahead and do Multiverse of Madness, which I really enjoyed. I'm going to go ahead and give it an S rank, which might surprise some of you, but I liked Multiverse of Madness maybe just as much as Spider-Man No Way Home. I really loved them bringing Sam Raimi back into this whole thing and doing Doctor Strange. I know that he was a big fan of Doctor Strange growing up. Of course, he gave us the original Spider-Man trilogy. I feel like Multiverse of Madness really captured the tone of the Doctor Strange comics. And again, maybe this is pretentious of me to say, but I just feel like if people who didn't like Multiverse of Madness have probably never read a comic book. Just my guess, because everybody who has read a comic book, or everybody who does, is aware of like all of the old Strange Tales and the Doctor Strange comics, would see so much of that in Multiverse of Madness. And people are down on Wanda being a villain. Wanda has been a villain in the comic books, everybody. There's a famous moment, it was part of the really famous House of M storyline, where she utters the words, "No more mutants," and literally kills all the mutants, obliterates all the mutants in the Marvel Universe by just saying those words. She has been a horrible, horrible villain. Now, she's had great redemption arcs too, but Wanda has done some truly atrocious things as the Scarlet Witch in the comic books. So again, if you've read comics, her becoming a villain because out of convenience to save her children, her selfish needs, shouldn't surprise anyone. That it's just kind of who she is. And it didn't surprise me, not even separating it from the comics. I felt like that's what WandaVision was kind of leading towards with, of course, the death of Vision and, her whole TV show life not working out, her children going away. It was all leading towards her becoming the villain. Why is everyone surprised she's a villain? I don't understand. Anyways, Wanda is an Omega class villain in the comics. She's a bad guy. Sorry. And then we've got, what came first? Thor: Love and Thunder or Ms. Marvel? I think Ms. Marvel started first, but I can't remember. Or Moon Knight. We're going to do Moon Knight. I really liked Moon Knight. I'm going to give it an A. It's not quite S rank, but I really enjoyed Moon Knight. It's good. I love Oscar Isaac's portrayal. It kind of has the opposite problem of Spider-Man. Not that that was a problem in Spider-Man No Way Home, but it has the opposite issue, if there's an issue at all, which is like, if Spider-Man No Way Home had too many ties to the rest of the MCU, Moon Knight was lacking any ties to the MCU. It would have been really nice to get like a quick cameo by like anybody. I don't even know, like maybe a quick Doctor Strange in there or something. It feels a little weird at this point in the game to have a Marvel show that doesn't really feature anything from the rest of the MCU, doesn't even really mention anything else from the rest of the MCU. So that feels a little awkward, but I really enjoyed the Moon Knight show. I really loved Oscar Isaac as Mark Spector. I loved Ethan Hawke as the villain. It was a great show. I just wish that it had more ties to the rest of the MCU. It just feels kind of like its own, like really feels like its own solo thing. Until we'll see he'll show up in Midnight Suns or something, but until then it felt really isolated. And I guess that's fine, but I would have liked to have seen someone from the MCU in there, just so that, like, it feels more connected, but, whatever. Anyways, then we have Thor: Love and Thunder, or I guess I skipped What If. What If feels a little divorced from the rest of the MCU just because it is What If, and it has, Elseworld stories. I'm going to give What If a B. I think it's good, but I think that there's potential for it to be better. I'm not really a fan of the weird cel-shaded CG animation in it. I wish that they would have done, I know that it would take way longer, but I wish they would have done more traditional hand-drawn. I'm really not a fan of whatever that animation is in the show. And, mostly because of that is why it's getting a B and not like an A or anything better. Not a fan of the animation. We've got Thor: Love and Thunder, which I also really enjoy. I'm going to put it on A. It's not as good as Ragnarok, which is a shame. I remember when I first saw Love and Thunder, I was kind of on the fence on whether I liked it more or worse than Ragnarok. And I remember telling my friends the day after I saw Love and Thunder, I was like, I think this is better than Ragnarok. But then I thought about Ragnarok, and I thought about Hulk, Hela, Odin, Loki, like the whole shebang. I really love short-haired Thor. I love the eye patch. I really love him using thunder without having to use his hammer. I really loved, the Planet Hulk stuff. There's so much to love about Thor Ragnarok. Love and Thunder was good. It brought Jane Foster back, and I love her coming in as the new Thor, just like in the comics, and just like in the comics she had, the cancer and everything. I thought they really adapted that well. I loved Christian Bale as Thor, as Gore the God Butcher. Really, like, Love and Thunder is good. I mean, it's an A. It's still an A. And people are like, oh, Rich, you hate Love and Thunder. I don't hate Love and Thunder. I gave it an A. It's just not S rank. It's not quite as good as Ragnarok. Also, Ragnarok had Jeff Goldblum, and anything with Jeff Goldblum pretty much gets an S rank for me. But Ragnarok is just so good. Love and Thunder is also good, but it just isn't quite as good. I could rewatch Ragnarok an infinite amount of times, where I feel like if I kept watching Love and Thunder, I would get tired of it pretty fast, but it is a great movie. It's really funny. I know that a lot of people were like, it's too funny. It's not too funny. It was funny, but the problem was it just didn't have enough weight to it. You wouldn't have noticed it having too much humor if it had a little bit more weight to it. And I think the biggest loss is Loki. I think that Loki needs to be in Thor movies. And they could have found a way to bring the alternate universe Loki from the Loki show into this movie, and I thought that they would. And I guess I'm disappointed that Loki wasn't a part of it at all. But yeah, I think that's the main thing, was Loki. Loki really needs to be in Thor movies. But anyways, Love and Thunder was still good. Yeah. All right, so then we have Ms. Marvel. Ms. Marvel, I'm going to give it a B. It's not bad. It's good. It's just not really good or great. I think that's how we define this. Like, S rank is great. A is very good. B is just good. It's not C, which is okay. It's not D, which is bad. It's just O. Well, it's better than okay. It's good. It's kind of hard to define. I would say that if it wasn't for that end credit scene, it would probably have gotten a C from me. Honestly, that made all the difference for a lot of different reasons, because the Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel character in the comics is an Inhuman, and they made her an Inhuman at a time when Marvel Comics were basically trying to replace the mutants with Inhumans, because at that time they didn't have the film rights, and they're like, we're never gonna be able to have mutants in the MCU, so anybody who gets these crazy powers from birth is gonna be an Inhuman now. But now we have the rights to the X-Men in the MCU, so they reworked Kamala's backstory, so instead of being an Inhuman, she's a mutant. And at the end, during the end credits, her friend says, your genes, your DNA, there's a mutation. And you hear that X-Men the animated series, just like we heard when Xavier rolled in on his yellow chair in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And I'm so glad that they're using the animated series theme as just like the theme of the X-Men now. Just as it always should have been, because I think everybody really associates that theme with the X-Men anyway. But that end credit scene elevated Ms. Marvel from a C show to a B show. Just saying. You could probably skip the whole show and just go right to the end credits or whatever of her being told that she's a mutant, and you'd get you'd get the whole thing. Anyways, it doesn't matter. The show was okay. You can go ahead and watch it if you want, but it's probably the weakest. I think it's probably the weakest of the Disney Plus Marvel shows. To no fault of its own. It's just, not everything can be WandaVision, okay? I think that's... Well, there's the I Am Groot stuff, which I know that they, for some reason, listed all the episodes individually. But I'm just going to use one Groot thumbnail to kind of represent all of the I Am Groot show. I'm going to give it an A. They're like 5-minute episodes, guys. They're really short, but they're really cute. They're really good. I'm going to put them on A. And then I don't think that this list has She-Hulk yet, because maybe this list was made right before She-Hulk came out. But I guess it makes sense, because She-Hulk isn't finished yet. We only have one episode of She-Hulk out, so I guess we can't really judge She-Hulk. But yeah, I guess there's nothing really else on this that I want to put on the list. So I think that's pretty much it. if She-Hulk is as good as I hope, I mean, yeah, I can't really judge She-Hulk based on one episode. I really did enjoy the first episode of She-Hulk, and I can't wait for, of course, Charlie Cox as Daredevil to make his appearance, as was teased um, in 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 the trailers and everything. Anyways, I think that's basically going to do it for us. This was a really long tier list. We spent over an hour doing it. Infinity War and Endgame, probably still the best movies out of all this. But I can't wait for the rest of She-Hulk, and I'm really looking forward to Thunderbolts and Secret Wars and everything coming out as we go along here. Really jazzed for all this. Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite MCU movie or show? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Rich Alvarez if you haven't already, and hit that bell to stay notified. Until next time, I'm Rich Alvarez, and you've been watching the Rich Alvarez channel. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Bye. Oh, look. I turned the page by accident.